Good afternoon, everybody. This is David Runge, nurse practitioner. I'm recording my slideshow presentation, and first I'd like to advance to slide number 2. The title of my paper was I Can't Get No Satisfaction. I think that's a song by the Rolling Stones. Well, you might have heard of it. Anyway, the picture there is my cat Monster, and I used to ride with him to Boston back and forth to visit my wife when she was going through her fellowship. Anyway, he looks a little dissatisfied in that picture. Basically, the first slide here is to talk about the introduction to satisfaction. Other parts of this will be barriers against satisfaction. Why does it matter? And how can we go about getting it? I'd like to move on. Slide number 3. Satisfaction is a state of being fulfilled. Basically, what that means is that it's a simple human explanation that if you're feeling satisfied, you probably don't have any complaints about something. A simple analogy would be to think about your favorite meal and how you feel about when you have it, or when you're about to have it, or after you're done eating it. Usually a good way to describe your feeling is that you're satisfied. Nurse dissatisfaction is something that's very important to me because I see people leaving the field because they're unhappy, and I hear more and more that nurses are unhappy. And that's also true of nurse practitioners. A lot of my colleagues feel overworked, underappreciated, and even sometimes underpaid. But all these things, they start piling up, and it leads to something called dissatisfaction, which is not what we want to have when we go to work. Moving on. First of all, there are some barriers to being satisfied. One of the most important ones, I think, is that we have our own set of rules and regulations. We follow something called the CARE model, but we're being supervised by people who are non-nurses, whether that's practice managers or whether that's our physician colleagues. I don't think they quite understand or appreciate how different we are from them. Also, one of the things I've noticed is that there is a big inequality in the pay scale from state to state, region to region for nurses and nurse practitioners. For instance, in the Northeast, nurses and nurse practitioners make a pretty good salary. But if you go to places like Mississippi and Alabama, the pay scale drops dramatically. Of course, they would say that's the cost of living that's lower, but I think there's more to it than the story than that. Concepts like mandatory and voluntary overtime, working longer shifts, they all work against being satisfied. I don't think anyone likes being told they have to do this. Inter-practice collegiality, basically that's getting along with our physician colleagues or our physician assistant colleagues. Being treated like a professional and not by using terms like mid-level. Moving on to slide number 5. Should it matter? Does being satisfied even matter for nurses? I think it does. I think for many of us, we went into nursing because it's a good career, but I think a lot of us went into it because it's a calling in life. It is a professional career. We have accrediting bodies. We're judged by state practice acts. I think being treated like a professional is something that would lead towards satisfaction. Feeling satisfied for nurses actually improves retention. A lot of nurses are leaving the field because of dissatisfaction. And I think that's a tragedy, because if they came into this as a calling and then they see the reality of it later, I think it's a deterrent and a turnout for many. Being satisfied is important because you work better when you're feeling better about where you're working. Moving on. How do we get satisfied? There are several points here. I think being heard and appreciated by colleagues, our peers, as well as our physician colleagues. Not being called mid-levels is a good start. Advocating for public health and the health of our patients. That's bread and butter for nurses, but when we feel like we're being heard, we're able to be a better voice for our patients. One of the ways we're asking to be heard is by supporting safe staffing. It's a big deal in Massachusetts. It's controversial. It's still a work in process. Um, Research and growing our fund of knowledge, working on concepts like satisfaction, is important because the more we learn about what we do, the easier it is for future generations. We'll have more to work on. Um, One of the things I learned from this class is that we should be a louder voice. There's so many of us. We outnumber any other type of allied health professional. But nurses never say anything. We're never given the chance to, nor are we sought out, which is kind of sad. Supporting professionalism also means acting like a professional when you're at work. Keeping complaints at home, keeping your job separate from your home to a degree. And just, if you want to be treated like a professional, you should act like one. That's an advanced concept for another time, perhaps. And then, like I mentioned earlier, I think getting comparable pay would be something that greatly improves the satisfaction, and it may even attract more nurses. To make $30,000 a year and to work in places like Mobile, Alabama, or down the deep south, where you can make 2, 3 times that working up in the Northeast or maybe the West Coast. I think that just shows you how different and varied the nurses are being treated. But I think to feel better about oneself, there are a lot of steps that we could all do to improve our satisfaction rate. And in the end, I think being satisfied is an individual concept. Lastly, my last slide is my cat Monster looking pretty happy. We were somewhere on the turnpike heading towards Boston, and he just looks like a happy soul. Thank you.